Well, hey everyone, this is Wired Up Retro episode 54, and today's episode I will be showing off a collection of mine, the NES controllers, okay? And I have a pretty good collection of controllers. I don't have a huge cartridge collection, but I have my favorites on the NES, Tetris being one of those. And so, just like in our last episode, this is going to be an episode about classic video games, not just on the NES, obviously, but you're going to want to maybe use these controllers on some of our newer systems using adapters. And I'm going to go through how to do that in this episode so you can play some interesting game titles from the 80s, and also game titles from present day as well. So I'm going to be showing a little Pac-Man. I'll be showing a little bit of some of the classic games from the Atari Flashback Volume 2 on the PlayStation 4 and Atari Flashback Volume 1 on the Xbox One console. And again, using NES controllers to play them. Now, the original Atari 2600 controller might be fun to play some of those classic games with, but let's think about this for a moment. It's only got one button. If you want to play, let's say you want to play Asteroids on the Atari Flashback Volume 1 compilation disc. Well, you can arrange for pressing up to be, forward thrust, and press the button to fire. And then when you want to do hyperspace, well, what are you going to do then? I guess push down, okay? But while you're going left and right playing Asteroids, you might accidentally go a little down and then you hyperspace out of there. So that's kind of a hassle. So I kind of like the idea of using NES controllers because they don't have just one button, but they have two. And some of those NES controllers, they're actual joysticks, like let's say for instance, this particular one. This actually has two buttons that you can, let's say this is what you want to fire with, and that's the one you want to hyperspace with. And when you thrust, you just press forward. Well, if you basically go to the options menu and make sure you get your button presses all secured with the mapping feature of the game, then you can play the game effectively with an NES controller on your Xbox One or PS4. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm not ignoring Atari controllers this episode. I'm just trying to get a controller that might even be better than an Atari for classic gaming. And these are all, 1980s controllers, so we're going to have a lot of fun with them. All right, one thing I do want to go over is that in the last episode for, let's say, the Xbox One, I showed a way on that episode how to attach a paddle top to this little gizmo here. This is a 3D printed steering wheel. I printed it at my local library, and basically this allows you to control racing games very effectively, but not only that, but if you pop this on top, and I show you how to do it in the last episode, you can control paddle games on the Atari Flashback Volumes 1, 2, or 3. And I showed you also on the PlayStation 4 controller how it's done as well. So it's a pretty efficient method if you want to get some classic gaming done the right way on your newfangled consoles. All right, so let's just go over my collection of NES controllers. I definitely have a few to share with you today. First, you have the original NES gamepad, which obviously is the most iconic of all the controllers. Back in the day, I decided to have one of my NES controllers modified, basically hacked, to enable it to be useful on Atari 2600 and Atari 7800. So I think there are still people doing these hacks today. They charge somewhere around $35, $45 total to do it. I think back then I probably paid like $28. This is probably 20 years ago to accomplish that. But yeah, if you want to play Atari games with an NES controller, I'll vouch for it. It's definitely a nice controller to use. And I also have this NES Max. This is also a Nintendo controller with a very unique D-pad. It slides around. A lot of people like this controller just because it's got a unique feel to the directional pad. Kind of slides instead of just pressing a cross around. Now, I also own another very unique controller for the NES called the Froggo Games Turbo Stick Gamepad. That's right here. Definitely a unique controller. This one has some turbo function, and it's got rounded edges, which I kind of like. The D-pad is not a cross, it's just a circle D-pad. So again, kind of unique. Froggo Games, by the way, is the company that made some Atari 2600 games that really weren't all that awesome. Spider Droid, Karate, and a couple others. Yeah, I think Seahawk was one of those. So anyways, those games, not that great. The controller, though, actually feels pretty comfortable in the hands, so I guess we can give Froggo Games a bit of a thumb up just for their attempt at a controller. Another controller I want to mention here that's a good D-pad controller is the QuickShot Starfighter 2W gamepad, and that's model QS-157. This particular gamepad I don't have in my collection, but I did want to show it off because it's kind of got that nice black and red appearance. If you're an Atari fan, Atari gaming might be fun with a black and red controller, more so than with a light gray controller. All right, now another controller that's a nice gamepad is the QuickShot QS-126 NES controller. And there's actually an Atari 2600 version of this controller. So this one is very unique. I'm showing it on the screen there. It kind of reminds me of this controller, the Intellivision controller. This is the Sears version. But it's got that pad on it. So I would say if you're into game pads as opposed to, or circle pads as opposed to D-pads with a cross, that might be an exceptional controller for you to try out. All right, now we're moving on to spherical D-pad controllers. These are not very common. I know Rockland made one for the Atari 2600 back in the early 80s, and it was called the Unroller controller, I believe. So yeah, I'm showing that up on the screen. It's definitely unique. I have had that in my collection for a few years. I also have this QuickShot QS-121 NES controller that's it's got a lot bigger ball on top. And again, these are just D-pads basically. This one actually has micro switches in it, and well, the Rockland one does too. And you can actually get a distinctive click when you move that around, click in each direction on the D-pad. And this NES controller has micro switches in the buttons as well. It's a pretty big controller, and I'm not a huge fan of it, but I definitely would say it's very, very unique. All right, so now we're going to go on to the handlebar controller. This is the QuickShot QS-129N Flight Grip 2. And there's actually a 2600 version of this. I think it's pretty rare. It's called the QS-129F. So if you're an Atari fan, you might want to track that down if you can. It's definitely got a unique look and feel to it. And again, probably not the best D-pad. It kind of cuts into your finger a little bit. The buttons are maybe not in the ideal place for where you want to fire away, but if you get used to it, maybe you could end up liking it. I'm not sure. All right, so now we're going to go on to joysticks with micro switches on board. And we have the, first off, one that I don't own. I got a snapshot of it, the C&L Gunshot Deluxe. This is a right-handed stick, or really you could use it as a lefty as well, and I'm going to explain why here. There are 3 buttons on this controller. So you've got 2 on the stick up top there, and then you've got 1 on the base, which is kind of nice. And if you are right-handed, you would just use the 1 on the base for one of the button functions of your NES game, and then the 1 on the top of the stick, I guess, would be the second button function. If you grab the unique 2600 version of this Gunshot controller, you will have a button down below and a button up top as well. I think that's more of I'm pretty sure that's a 2-button, not a 3-button controller, but I don't actually have that. By the way, the NES model number is G108124-3, and then there's a T-2. I'm not sure if that's a serial number or something like that, but anyway, it's a tough one to find. I've never actually seen it going out shopping or anything. I've never seen one at a thrift store or any kind of flea market or game store. All right, so now we'll move on. The QuickShot Spectra Video QS-112 flight stick is very common. All the buttons that are on this stick are great for playing games like Captain Skyhawk, for instance, or top-down shooters like 1942. And by the way, B is the trigger on this one, and then the A button is the one on the very top. And this is a suction cup controller, and I'll probably be mentioning whether you get suction cups with these controllers or not. By the way, that QS-121 NES controller does have suction cups that that can, that's that spherical D-pad controller. It's got suction cups on it. All right, so now we're going forward here, and the Epix 500XJ NES handheld joystick also has micro switches. It's in the micro switch category. This is a right-handed joystick, and you got the controller itself is also available on the Atari 2600. So many Atari 2600 fans have become very used to the 500XJ. That version only has a single button, but the NES version has 2 buttons, which is kind of nice. All right, and there's also a Master System version of that, which has 2 buttons as well. So the 500XJ, nice clicky joystick. All right, now the Camerica Freedom Stick is a ball-top joystick, which basically is for lefties. You got it on the left side. Wireless controller, and it actually has cables that can be attached to it that are interchangeable with the version for the Genesis or Sega Master System. So if you trade out your cables, you can go from NES to Master System or Genesis, and then go back to NES if you want to, if you trade those cables again. So that's kind of nice and convenient. The Camerica Freedom Stick definitely has nice micro switches on board. Now I also want to show you this controller. This right here is the Bishu Jazz Stick. And it's very similar to another controller that I own, this being the Sega Master System Sega Control Stick. And this has the stick on the right. The Bishu as well has that, and then 2 buttons on the left side. So it is meant for right-handed game playing. All right. So the Jazz Stick is a nice ball-top controller if you're into playing with a ball-top. I think that's a nice one. And it also has suction cups on the bottom, so if you plant it on a table in front of you, it can be stabilized that way. All right, so now we're going to go to the joysticks that are for the NES that are not having micro switches on board. All right, so I'll show one of my favorites here, the Kraft Starmaster joystick. And there's also a 2600 version of this particular joystick. And then there's also one that's pretty similar, not an exact clone to it, but this one is known as the Spectra Video Model 318-101 joystick. They're right-handed controller joysticks, so I like that about it since I'm a righty. Another neat thing about the Starmaster, again, if you're playing a game like, let's say, Gravatar or Asteroids, if you want to go forward, you can put the thrust on pressing up, and then the main fire button on the base of the controller can be for firing your gun, and then for hyperspace you tap the top button, and if you get it set up in your menus on your PS4, Xbox One, Flashback, Atari disc, you can have a very effective means to play games like Gravatar and Asteroids. So I really do like this Kraft Starmaster. It has a very satisfying click. It's not micro switches, but it's got like a dull thud every direction you go. And I think that this Atari 2600 version has a similar feel, but it's not quite as thunky when you hit each direction, whereas this one for the NES is. So I would definitely say this is superior and a whole lot of fun to play with. I love the Kraft Starmaster joystick. By the way, on this one, the B button is on the base, the A button is on top. Okay, now let's move on. I'm going to touch on 3 here, actually 4 controllers that I don't have in my collection, but I think are worth a mention. The Wico Command Control joystick. Now this is for right or left-handers. You can, move the stick with either hand and you'll be fine. You can notice the buttons on the top of the joystick. They also made a version of this kind of controller for the ColecoVision and the Intellivision as well. I have the ColecoVision version. I like the way the joystick feels in the hand when you move it around. It's got kind of a, I don't know, it's not squishy, but it's definitely not a satisfying click. But it has a unique feel. For some games like Gyrus, I think it might be actually extra cool to play with that joystick. All right, here's another one that I don't have, the Shinsei Hyperstick. This is a ball top with triangular buttons, and it's designed for left-handers. All right, another one that a lot of people own is the NES Advantage arcade joystick. It's a ball top joystick, again, for left-handers. I definitely would say this is very popular and easily found on eBay. All right, so another joystick that I have is this RMP NES joystick. Now this actually right here, it's similar to my Starmaster joystick. It's a little more compact, but on this one, the A button is at the top of the stick, or I'm sorry, the B button's at the top of the stick, and the A button is on the base of the stick, which is opposite to the Starmaster. So I found that kind of an interesting thing, that they swapped them for that the RMP NES joystick. Now I'm pretty sure that RMP is the name of the company. The name of the joystick is still eluding me. If anybody really knows what it's called, the official name, I'd greatly appreciate knowing that. All right, so another controller I want to mention here is another one I don't have. This is the Bishu Zoomer flight controller. And this is basically a flight yoke that works on NES, and there are buttons on both sides. It's a pretty big, large controller. I think the lowest price I've ever seen this at was maybe about a year ago. I was up in Michigan visiting a friend, and sure enough, there is the Bishu Zoomer on sale for, I think it was like $15. And I thought, man, that thing is so big. I just can't, I couldn't stomach it. So I didn't buy it and take it home. I already have like 3 PC 15-pin type connector flight yokes, and that's enough, okay? So I've got enough flight yokes. All right, now we want to move on. The motion joystick. Now I don't have the base attached, but this has a connector and a cord, and this is basically motion control, and it uses, I guess, potentiometers inside. One nice thing about this is for flight games, this can be a very nice controller. You know, play Top Gun or something like that with it. Or top-down shooters might work pretty nicely as well. But there's certain genres this is good for, and then there might be a few that aren't so good. Maybe even driving games might be okay with this when it's connected to your NES with its cord. I wish it was wireless. That would be nice, but no, we don't have that. But it is, you know, you can use the right hand with it, left hand with it. And there's an ability to swap between the A and B buttons just by clicking that switch. So if you, let's say, had B here and A here, well, if you click that, now you have A here and B here. Okay, so kind of nice to have that. All right, also, let's see, oh yeah, the Grip It controller. And this is made by Rich Wide, very, very similar to this one. It is basically the same thing, except at the end of the cord, you have a dual plug, or dual plugs. One is for NES and one is for Sega Master System. I figure it also can work on Genesis as well. So the Grip It controller might be a little more versatile if you own multiple systems, but it's basically the game handler, except just more versatile. All right, so another thing I want to touch on are controller attachments that change up the way you play your games a bit. All right, so what I have here is a clip that is called the Super Controller, and this clip goes on your NES controller. You just slide it right on like this, and once it's in place, got the joystick and the 2 buttons. This is actually my Atari 7800 compatible NES controller that I had, you know, modded many years ago. And I really did like having that joystick there, and I don't know why, but it's just kind of a different way to play your games compared to the D-pad, and maybe for a game like Centipede, that might be a bit more desirable than using a D-pad on that game. Same with Missile Command and a few others. All right, so this is definitely unique. Another controller accessory is this one. I believe this is called the Mothership. But the nice thing about this is that you can actually open it up and then slide in your NES controller. I'm showing you some images here on how that's done. Definitely a unique animal, and once you got your controller in there, you can choose to fire with this top button, or you can use the buttons here. They have a little bit of a mushy type feel to them, but you know, they do the job. And of course you got your start and select button, and the joystick itself has again, not a real satisfying click with each direction, but it can work. I have also, it's got the suction cups, so if you want to mount it to a table, that can be nice. I have found that Mothership controller is not the ideal, because sometimes it just doesn't get contact with the D-pad as well as you want. It's close, but I'd say not quite what you were hoping for. So not going to full-fledged recommend that one. All right, another thing I want to mention here, you might notice on my table, I've got this original Atari Flashback controller. This went with that little tiny console, Atari Flashback, back, I don't know, 15 years ago, when it came out. It was packaged with this. And it's got, this one actually has satisfying click in all directions. It's kind of a unique mini-looking Atari 7800 controller with a button on the left, button on the right. Now the Flashback itself had like 2600 versions of 7800 games, like Desert Falcon. And so anyways, it's okay as far as a Flashback console. It's not the best, obviously. But the controller is unique. It has a 9-pin connector, and a whole lot of people, when they got their Flashback, ran and plugged this in their Atari 2600 and found out it didn't work. And that's because on board is a circuit that has NES protocol. Okay, so it is technically an NES controller, but what's odd is it doesn't have an NES controller connector. It's got this 9-pin Atari-looking connector. So there are people like me who thought, let's make an adapter so it'll work on an NES that would convert the 9-pin to the NES connector. And those are actually pretty easy to make, and I've shown in one of my other Wired Up Retro videos how to make those. I believe that was Wired Up Retro episode number 3. So if you check that video out and find out how to make that little adapter with a solderless connector, I'm sure you could enjoy playing some of your NES games with this. But we're also going to use this today with that adapter and a couple other adapters to play PS4 and Xbox One games. And it's kind of neat because it has Atari actually right on the sticker on the front. All right, so let me show you something here. If you're going to plug things into your PS4, first off, the first adapter you want to get is this CronusMax Plus adapter. Now, as of right now, there's a new version of CronusMax, and they stopped producing CronusMax Plus adapters. The new one is called Cronus Zen. Cronus Zen, I think, runs somewhere between $80 and $90, I believe, shipped. It could be as high as 100 because it's in short supply right now, and people who are selling it are kind of jacking the price up. The reason it's in short supply, I think, is mainly because of production numbers being lowered by the virus that's out right now. So eventually, hopefully, they'll get a production up and running 100%, and we'll be seeing them readily available in stores and also online. Right now, they go through periods of time where they have them, and then they get sold out, and then you got to wait for the next production run. Anyway, Cronus Zen does exactly what CronusMax Plus does, but it has some extra features, but it's backward compatible with this, so you don't have to worry about, is it going to work the same? It will, okay? So, if you buy either of these products, you're set. You take it to your laptop and you program it. It's easy to do, just follow the instructions. Program it so that PlayStation 3 is the input controller, and that it outputs to a PS4 console. Okay, that is if you're wanting to play on a PS4. So that's the way I programmed this. Then I went and bought this Tomee NES to USB controller adapter. Okay. Now I'd like to show you how to connect all this in the setup. This is the DualShock 4 controller. You're going to take its USB connector. You have a CronusMax Plus and place it in the USB. This is the waiting for connection symbol, and then when you plug that in, it's going to show a 0 on the screen, which means now your DualShock 4 controller has been fully authenticated. You can now unplug that and then take your Tomee NES to a USB controller adapter and plug that in there, and then you can at that point then take any old NES controller. I have the Froggo Games Turbo Stick gamepad plugged in now, and we're good to go for playing games on the PS4 with this. Pretty awesome. Okay, so we've got Atari Flashback Classics Volume 2 up and on the screen. We're going to click around and take a look at what titles are available. Anything from, looks like Asteroids might be a good choice, Adventure, Breakout, Double Dunk, Crystal Castles, Gravitar, Night Driver, Off the Wall, which is like kind of a breakout kind of game, Super Breakout. Race, which has you going around a track, pointing the stick in the direction that you want the car to go. Sentinel, classic game. Secret Quest, as you roving around different areas of a castle or a mansion. So I think I know what I'm going to play. I'm going to go back and we're going to play a little Asteroids Arcade with the NES controller. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and change up the controllers now to an actual ball-top joystick. We're going to get the Jazz controller by Bishu up and running. Okay, I got Bentley Bear in action here. Whoa, he's moving really fast. And I think that's because this is an analog controls game designed for you know, trackball or, you know, even a thumbstick that's analog. There we go. Tough. All these controllers are going to be digital controllers, so an analog game like this can be a little tricky. I guess you could tap it, you know, and get somewhere. There we go. Haha. Oops. Ah. Oh, that's tough. Yahoo! On to the next one. Oh. All right. Let's try another game. We'll go into the Atari 2600 area. Okay. Give Secret Quest a try. I'm going to use the Starmaster because it's one of my favorite controllers. This was actually pretty nice, this Bishu Jazz stick. That was actually very nice. I'm going to try the Starmaster. All right. Secret Quest. I was just playing this the other night on my 2600. Here? Yeah, that's where I've been. Okay. Apparently I did something right. All right, let's try a different game. Okay, so I'm switching out controllers now. I've got this Mini 7800 Flashback controller with my little adapter that converts it to an NES, and then the Tomee NES to USB, connecting that to our CronusMax Plus. And we're going to go ahead and head over here, play some Missile Command, the 2600 version. All right, nice. Yeah, feels good. All right, nice. So nextly, I'm going to head on over to the Xbox One, and we'll play a game or two with one of these joysticks, just to show you that that works as well. All right, Xbox One up, and Pac-Man Championship Edition 2, and with my Epix 500 XJ. Let's go ahead and play this game. All right. Now let's go back to Atari Flashback Volume 1 for the Xbox One. All right, so we've got our game up on the screen. We're going to be playing Yars Revenge here in a moment. One thing I have noticed is that on the NES controllers, every button on the face of that controller is put into action with these adapters. And what I mean by that is even the start and the select button on the NES controller represents one of the 4 buttons on the right-hand side of an Xbox One controller. So you have to kind of do a little trial and error to figure out which one's which. But the main fire button on an NES controller is the B button, and that actually represents an Xbox One A button or a PlayStation 4 X or cross button. So it's very intuitive actually, and nice that it works out like that. You know, I had mentioned before that this original Flashback controller from 15 years ago has a 9-pin connector, and with an adapter I made that I was then able to connect it to my other couple adapters, and it worked. Well, the same applies to a couple other controllers that I've come across over time. These are the 9-pin type connector controllers that really you would think would work on a Genesis or an Atari, but really don't. They are, I guess you could say, Famiclone controllers. So I'm going to use one of those Famiclone controllers to play Yars Revenge. And let's go ahead and get her going. All right, here we go, Yars Revenge. Well, I sure had a lot of fun showing you my NES controllers today, along with some Atari games on these newer game systems. I do want to mention one other thing. If you take that CronusMax Plus or Cronus Zen, combine it with that Tomee NES to USB controller adapter, you can actually add what's called an 8-bit do retro receiver. And if you do plug that in to the Tomee, this 8-bit do retro receiver sends out a wireless Bluetooth signal to be picked up by various types of different controllers that are, you know, the latest and greatest PS4 controllers, the Bluetooth Xbox One controller, the Wii U Pro controller, as well as Switch controllers from what I understand. Now, one other controller that'll work is this one. This is my Wii remote, okay? Now, a Wii remote can be used kind of sideways, you know, instead of using that kind of controller, you'd use this controller like this. But another option is to take an additional adapter, and this is all done, you know, through wireless means, but you connect that here, and this is an NES receiver for the Wii remote, okay? And it's actually made by Retrobit. This is the one I have anyways. So when you get this plugged in and it's connected wirelessly to your 8-bit do retro receiver, which is an NES item, then you can plug your various NES controllers into this and it'll work. And I also am aware that they make one of these for the Super NES as well. So if you've got a really cool Super NES arcade stick that you want to play with, this will allow that. So it's very nice. I've tested it out. It does work, and it's all wireless, so it's pretty cool. So I thought I'd mention that at the very end, just so you can know that you can do this if you don't want to have wires and you want to do it wireless. All right, so that about wraps up the episode today. If you want to check me out on Twitter, I do have my Twitter handle shown below, so definitely check me out there. I have a Patreon account. If you decide to help contribute to the channel and the purchases that I make, I greatly appreciate that. And I will look forward to talking to you sometime in the near future. We've got a lot of great plans for upcoming Wired Up Retro episodes, so do make sure that you subscribe and leave a like, a thumb up, and definitely comment below if you have anything that you noticed in the episode that, you know, made you nostalgic or made you enjoy the episode. I look forward to hearing those comments, and I'll definitely participate and offer my feedback if you offer yours. Okay, so take care, have a great time gaming out there. Enjoy your summer.